Welcome to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where we feature top leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry with your host, Drew Hendricks. Now, let's get started with the show.
Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast, where I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. The goal of this show is to uncover the hidden stories that lie behind the wine and craft beverages we enjoy every day. Now, today's show, it's a bit different. We're going to be doing a retrospective of some of the best episodes, some of my favorite episodes that we had. And I have Dr. Jeremy Weiss of Rise 25. He's done thousands of interviews with top CEOs and executives. And today he's going to be interviewing me.
Drew, I'm really excited about this because anytime I get your expertise in the wine and craft space, it is a good day. And, you know, if you're watching the video, you can see we're actually going to be going through some of the past episodes. So you can watch the video or listen to wherever you would like. But before we get into it, this episode is brought to you by Barrels Ahead. And Barrels Ahead, what they do is they work to implement a one-of-a-kind marketing strategy, one that highlights your authenticity, tells your story, connects you with your ideal customers. Who doesn't want that, Drew? And in short, you help wineries and craft beverage producers unlock their story to unleash their revenue. And, you know, I'm going to brag on you a little bit, Drew, because I know you, but you've been doing this since the 90s, okay? Yeah. So there's not many people, and this is like the inception of the internet, and you produced sites back in those days, from membership sites to other sites. So check them out, and you can go to barrelsahead.com to learn more. And, you know, what I want to do is we're looking at barrelsahead.com, and you can go to the podcast page to check out any of the episodes. You've had some amazing people on, and I wanted to start with this one, okay? A case of innovative disruption in the wine industry with Daniel Dow of Dow Vineyards. He's a winemaker, proprietor, and there's a couple of things that stuck out with Daniel I'm going to have you talk about. You know, he crafted California's first growth Cabernet and is in Central Coast ambassador. And there's a couple of things you examine: climate and temperature, right? This is stuff, Drew, I guess winemakers geek out on, because this is what actually moves the needle, right?
It's fascinating. And what he's done, he actually pulled a hat trick. He had exited with an IPO for a healthcare software system, and then went into the wine industry. And he went in there not only just to make wine, but he solved one of the biggest problems that wineries have faced with global warming. The fruit's coming in riper with more sugar, and it's harder to ferment that wine dry. Because back in the day, we all used all wines were based on the same kind of yeast strain, which tended to max out at about 14% alcohol. So you would very rarely get a wine higher than 14% alcohol with the current yeast at that time. And what happened right around 98, 99, a new yeast strain was discovered that could ferment alcohol much higher, 17, 18%. But the problem is, unlike that original yeast strain that was very floral and actually added something to the wine, this new kind of super yeast that could ferment the wines dry was kind of smelled like cardboard. So Daniel and his team over in Italy, they started analyzing all the native yeasts in their vineyard, and he hit it 1 in a million shot. In the native yeast, he found a yeast strain in his vineyards in Paso that had the same floral complexity of that original yeast, yet could take the wines and ferment them dry at a higher level, like the 15, 16%, which is necessary in today's warmer growing conditions.
I don't know if you invented that term, Drew, just now, but super yeast is a pretty cool term.
Yeah.
So he should put that on the side of a bottle. He has super yeast, right? The next one, so people check out that episode. The next one's B2B solutions for wine brands, equipment needs with Brad and Lisa Warner of Rutherford Equipment Rental. They've been in the business for a long time and worked with a lot of different of the top wineries and companies and facilities. And, some things that stuck out is kind of how to better communicate with your customers, new business scale, educational void around cellar procedures, purification process of wine tanks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brad and Lisa, they're great people. They run an equipment rental business for the wine industry, and they previously kind of been known as the cult supplier because there was really no way to get a hold of them other than their email address. And they actually are some of our clients here at Barrels Ahead, and they came to us kind of looking for a website redesign. And what we learned was so much more about their company and how their company is built on a human touch or a human interaction and consultation. And you get more than just the actual tank. You get this whole experience. You get all this advice, this 30 years. Their motto is, we don't sell anything that we wouldn't use ourselves. We've been in your boots. And the idea of this episode and the idea of just working with Brad and Lisa is that a lot of these B2B sites are a little generic, and they're a little they lack that human spirit, because you think of a business dealing with a business. And what we kind of explored together in building the site is that their site needs to have that human touch, and that most businesses need to have that human touch, because at the end of the day, it's a person interacting with a person, even if you are in that B2B category.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like I go to lots of sites and it's just corporate looking. It doesn't differentiate it. And I just went to one recently. I'm like, there's no faces, there's no people like on it. It could look, you could replace that site with a different company name and I wouldn't know anything different. So I love that you kind of take people who are the best kept secret and actually help them tell their story on a page so people anywhere can read it 24/7, right?
Absolutely. And so many businesses, they just hide behind jargon, or they hide behind the common industry phrases. And what happens is an anonymous site. So the one thing that really came out on that episode is a real importance to just bring humanity to your site.
And sometimes you need other people to do that because you're too close to it. So, you've done this for lots of different industries, specifically in the wine industry too. So I'm going to go to the next one, which is the Barefoot wine story. Okay. How hardship, hustle, heart built. So jump into that with Michael Houlihan, co-founder of the world's largest, most recognizable wine brand, Barefoot Wines.
Yeah, Michael, what a great interview. So everyone knows he founded Barefoot Wines. He came out with that great book outlining the whole story. But the one part about that episode that really struck out to me is what he's doing with his business audio theater. And that's talking about bringing that humanity into the conversation, making it personable. And what they did is, rather than just read the audiobook, they hired actors to go out and act certain parts, which brought everything to life. It really magnified the story. So if you haven't checked out the audiobook, that's the one you need to check out. The Barefoot Spirit, How Hardship, Hustle, and Heart Built America's #1 wine brand. It's the one audiobook that really, it's going to open your mind to what's possible.
This was a great interview also.
Oh yeah, we jointly did that interview. Yeah,
we did.
That was fun.
That was a great one. Simplifying the wholesale distribution model with Cheryl Murphy-Jersey of LibDib, and co-founder. She has over 20 years of experience in the alcohol industry in general. And some of the things that stuck out is just developing relationships for the alcohol distribution, customizing platform, which allows for flexibility, and just talks about the importance of the whole distribution model.
Yeah, Cheryl at LibDib, they're kind of reinventing the 3-tier system and how alcohol brands can actually do business within the 3-tier system and not have to depend on the big players. Now, she's partnered up with the big players, but what it allows you is to get your brand as even a small brand to get representation, or to allow your wines to be sold into other states. And one of the big tips there is that you've got to be active. You can't just put it onto a list and expect a store to carry it and promote it. You've got to be out there, and as a small brand, just like everything, you got to do the work.
Yeah. Michael Houlihan talks a lot about that as well. You can't build it and they will come. You have to constantly hustle. Designing your beverage brand with Lori, award-winning designer, world traveler, founder, and she kind of shows it as far as this episode goes. And you talk about future plans for Outshinery. You talked about creating connections, through websites, in authentic ways, and some of the favorite tools and resources and software.
Now, what Lori and her team over at Outshinery are doing is phenomenal. They take bottle shots. So it's the pictures of the wine on a website, and they overlay it with 3D modeling so that you don't have to ship the bottles. You don't have to get the labels dinged. But that's kind of just the start of it. What they also have is pretty much may not be the right term, but a photography plan in a box, the marketing shots in a box, where they've got recipe cards that you can include in your shipments, that you can overlay your wines on, that really looks like you spent $1 million on your branding and your photography.
Drew, it seems like there was some podcast mentioned. I don't know if any on the wine space that you listen to or have heard are good, but it looks like the Wine Tech Insiders podcast was mentioned.
Yeah, Lori's got a group of them that I forget the other two people's names, but they do a routine podcast where they kind of just discuss current topics of interest in the wine industry, so some of the bigger trends.
Nice. And if you think of any other podcasts people should check out in the wine space,
the other one is Interpreting Wine with Lawrence Francis. Now, Lawrence is based out of London. And what he does is he uses his podcast. He's done about 400 episodes, and he actually uses the podcast as a tool where wineries can promote their story and enhance their visibility with people. And he did a great thing with the AVAs up in Washington, where he did these in-depth interviews of all the winemakers and the AVA reps, and promoted that internationally on their podcast. And he's looking to get in some other regions as well. He's providing a very great platform.
What's the AVA stand for people that don't know?
American Viticultural Association.
Awesome. Next, we talked the art of screen printing and etching wine labels with Michael Bergen, and President CEO. And again, founded his company in 1989 and expanded to 82,000 square foot studio. His team produces over 100,000 bottles a day with this. And you talked everything screen printing in wine bottles.
Yeah, Michael and his team over there, they're really pushing the envelope on what can be done, or what can even be thought of on actually printing onto a glass bottle. So they also do the etching, and the etching has to be hand painted. But with the new technologies, with some of the new inks that are coming out of Italy, you can just do some amazing things, such as like glow in the dark inks.
Some of the innovations that are going on with the printing process. Nice.
Yeah.
The next one, Drew, we have Making the World Smaller, One Sip at a Time, with Jack of Gliding Eagle. Again, kind of specializing in global trade and data technology as well, and kind of pioneered direct-to-consumer wine sales by bringing it into kind of an international landscape, right? And so with Jack, you talked about a few things with the business, and again, the impact of the pandemic, some places that they're heading in the future, and just wine direct-to-consumer in general.
Yeah, Jack and his team over at Gliding Eagle, they currently represent about 200 wineries, and they help those wineries sell directly to the consumer across the world. At 30 countries, I think most over in Asia right now. And one of the big things that they're doing is they're helping the tracking and the provenance of the wine, which is super important with especially some of those upper end super premium wines. Fraud and counterfeits are a huge issue.
Really?
Yeah. So with the tracking and the provenance, then allowing those wineries to kind of ship internationally, it helps make the world a smaller place, and that people across the world get the same appreciation for the wines, and they have access to them.
What's the example, Drew, of that with fraud? How does that play out? Like someone just randomly tries to totally knock off the bottle and the label and put.
Yeah, there are a few documentaries about that.
Wow.
Where people will find a bottle of wine at a restaurant with the label, and they'll refill it, recork it, and try to resell it. And if you're in another country, you might not know what the original version of that wine is, or they'll just completely counterfeit the label, bottle it, and sell it. And it could be $2 wine inside it. They're selling it for a $1,500 Chateau Latour.
Wow. Who would have thought? The next one is Wines with Innovation and Craftsmanship with Joseph Wagner of Copper Cane Wines and Provisions. And again, this
one's got the wrong.
Yeah,
something happened
as
there.
Laurel. But let's talk about Joseph Wagner, a little bit of Copper Cane Wines and Provisions.
Yeah, Joe. He's founded Copper Cane after exiting one of the largest non-asset sales in the wine history, where he sold Maomi, which was kind of running in different contrast to where he wanted to go. Maomi had turned into this huge 500,000 case production, where he only wanted to do luxury small craft boutique wines, and he does everything out of a central location, so he can create a unified type of product. But he's producing wines up and down the West Coast now, including going into Oregon.
The next one, Drew, is discovering wine across the digital industry with Paul Mabry of Pix, CEO of Pix. Again, a digital platform harnessing the power of digital tools. And, you talk a lot about just different tools, technology, softwares in this one. He also sounds like he sat on the board of directors for several companies as well. And you talk kind of about his journey integrating digital and wine platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul's a true legend in tech. Everyone knows Paul. And Paul's latest venture, Pix.wine, it actually fully came out of, was fully released to the general public a few weeks ago, and has now become, I believe, the second largest wine platform. And this is about the third iteration of what he's been shooting for. And what he's trying to create is like the search engine for wine, the Google of wine, and how important that is to really allow wineries to have a platform, and not just wineries, but distributors as well, to get all their wines on one platform. And then you can actually bid just like at Google for ad slots. So your wine can go up and down. So it's not just based on price or just based on location. You can take your search intent and say, I want to find this wine, but I want the closest to me because I'm headed out to dinner and I got to go pick one up. Or I'm going to buy a lot of it. I want to find the lowest price version of this wine. So there's many different reasons why people are going to search for the same bottle of wine. And there's many stores that'll be offering the best choice depending on your search intent. And that's what Pix is doing.
That's great. People love their wine, Drew. I know you do. Investing and scaling your early stage beverage brand with Carlton Fowler and James Pellegrini, managing partners at Goat Rodeo Capital Management. And this was a very interesting one as well, because you talk about kind of the key difference between wine and spirit consumers, also kind of e-commerce, how it's changing the way consumers purchase alcohol and much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. James and Carlton, what a great idea. A venture capitalist specifically for the beverage space. And one of the things that they pointed out, because there's so many people trying to set up a new category, such as canned wine or craft alcohol or craft beverages, and they get pitched a lot. And the one advice that they had that stuck with me is you really need to be doing something different. And the one example that they had was one of their investors, or one of the companies they invested in, was Lawrence Cisnero and his company Drinksmith. Now, Drinksmith was also on our podcast. Lawrence, it was another great episode. But what sets Lawrence's company Drinksmith apart from all the other craft prepackaged craft cocktails is that the juice is separate from the alcohol, and it's cold pressed juice that has to be refrigerated, and then you twist the bottle when you're ready to drink it and mix it and mix the juice in with the alcohol, so you get that true craft taste. And that's an idea of how you got to think one step beyond. And hats off to Lawrence for solving all those consumer packaged goods problems about, one, shipping cold pressed juice so it can't sit on the shelves, and two, how do you separate the juice from the alcohol and make it easy for the consumer to mix?
And it's fresh.
And it's fresh.
Check that episode out.
And it's my new addiction. I've been drinking too much of
that. Why the top of your bottle matters with Heather Pollock of ACIC Cork Enclosures. Again, a lot of cool things about this one, because she touches a lot of different companies because she's a national sales consultant. So a lot of knowledge here and benefits and kind of her role in the wine and spirits industry, how she had to quickly adapt. She talks about, geeks out on the benefits of different closures as well. Cork or screw top. Talk about this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much thought. Actually, the general consumer doesn't understand how much thought goes into a closure? Should you have a screw top? Should you have a cork? Should it be a compressed cork? Should it be a synthetic cork? How, and really a lot of it has to go down to is how long do you want the wine to age? What's the use case for that wine? And then picking a kind of closure that is aligned with your brand. So there's a whole lot of initiatives going on about eco-friendly, and how cork is actually one of the more eco-friendly parts of the whole wine bottle construction.
Drew, I have a question about this. Where is it a gray area? So like there's probably people out there, yourself, who go, yeah, it's obvious. This wine should have a cork, this one should have a screw top. Is there a gray area where you're like, well, sometimes they choose cork, sometimes screw top for a particular, whether it's a type of wine or brand?
You know, it's all one big gray area. Some of it has to do with presentation. So if you're a super luxury brand, people are used to, and it's served particularly in a restaurant. There's the whole presentation of the wine at the table, and the sommelier pulling the cork out of the bottle, hearing that sound, that pop when the cork's pulled, is part of the whole experience. If you get a screw cap, you're not going to get that. You're not going to be handed the screw cap at your dinner table. You're going to kind of ruins that. So if your wine's destined to restaurant use and destined to kind of that higher end sommelier experience, a cork is going to be your best choice.
Yeah.
That aging aside, you want to kind of factor in that kind of sensory experience of it. On the other hand, if your wine's meant to be consumed over pizza on a weeknight, probably a screw cap's going to get you where you want to be quicker.
Yeah. Unless you can invent a cap, when you screw it off, it makes that popping cork sound. Mm-hmm. So that's your next innovation. The next one is the secret to making standout labels, with Rob Griswold and Stephen Martinez of Trisk Print Solutions. Again, another one that's been specialized in labels for wine and gourmet foods, and some of the eye for art that you talked about in this one, a couple of the new innovations in label making, how they create the art, designing the label. What about this one?
Yeah, Stefan and Rob, they're really on the forefront for labels. So they've got these new high density labels. I forget the actual name of the label, but there's a very tactile feel on the label with some raised text that really adds to that whole sensory experience as well. I mean, a shiny glossy label only gets you so far. It's really nice to actually have a label that becomes kind of a sensory feel on the bottle. And they're doing a lot of work with that.
The next one is crafting unique and sustainable bottles with Erica Harrop of the Global Package. And again, she's been in the winemaking industry for decades, even worked with leading glass companies back in the 90s. And, you talked about so many things, even from the source of the glass to environmentally friendly.
Yeah, Erica, she's, we had a good long talk, and this was right in the middle of the supply chain time. We didn't really talk about that, but glass supplies have been very constricted over the past year. And one of the other parts about the glass is that environmentally friendly glass and packaging. Few people kind of understand how heavy a glass bottle is. And sometimes you go into the wine store and you see this big bottle, it's super heavy, but just imagine the amount of effort it takes to ship that wine and ship that glass when you're just paying for that bottle that's hanging out. So she's been looking at some lighter weight bottles and glass, or glass for bottles, that has the same kind of stature on the shelf, but it weighs marginally less, which in turn just goes straight to the winery's bottom line when it comes time to ship it.
Really smart, because it's heavy. It's a heavy, shipping this thing, it's really heavy. So even shaving a little bit of weight.
Jancis Robinson in her Twitter feed always is calling out the heaviest wine labels, like not shaming. Well, maybe shaming. I'm just like, why do you need a 700? Yeah, why do you need a bottle that heavy?
Exactly. The creating authentic connections through social media with Shana.
Yeah, Shana she's a social media rock star. I mean, she's got a few classes the wineries can take on really how to level up their Instagram and some of their actually email marketing. And she's a new author. She's got her book, Randall, the Blue Spider Goes Surfing, that she wrote during the pandemic. I believe that she
You love
actually had
that.
a book come out.
You're a big surfer.
Yep. And yeah, so we kind of chatted a little bit about social media and how wineries can better utilize it.
Was there anything that stuck out that you've seen with, Instagram, Facebook, any other channels, Pinterest, of mistakes people making with
Yeah, you know
how
what?
they're doing their brands online?
You need to think about what your brand position is and what you stand for, and make sure that your social media kind of exemplifies that brand image. And ask yourself who your customer audience is, and not just make it about the picture of the bottle or the picture of the vineyard. It needs to tell a story beyond just that.
Mhm. Drew, the next one is, you're talking about sensory awareness with the cork popping, and this is
Mm-hmm.
exactly relating to this one, which is using sensory awareness to enhance the wine tasting experience with Dr. Hobie Wedler, who is blind. So this is even more important for Hobie and what he does at Sense Point. So talk about Dr. Wedler.
Yeah, Hobie's a great guy. He actually just came out with a new line of spices. So if you're looking for the ultimate roast chicken, check out Hobie's lemon rosemary chicken. It's fantastic. But anyways, back on this episode, Hobie brings up the point that the visual part of the wine tasting is actually opens you up to the most amount of prejudice. Because what you see, first of all, you see the label on the bottle. So you already form an opinion in your mind of what that wine ought to taste like. And then you see the color in the glass, so you kind of have a good idea of what it's going to taste like. But by that time, when the juice actually touches your mouth, you pretty much have shaped your palate to what it's going to be like. Whereas if you're liberated from the visual, you're forced to kind of smell. You're forced to kind of hear the cork pop. You're forced to kind of feel the wine on your palate, and then actually to just take the wine without any of that visual is super important. And what Hobie does is he helps wineries kind of embrace all the other senses in addition to just the visual.
Drew, last but not least, all right, Drew Thomas Hendricks. All right.
True.
And investing in automation and just some of the things that you recommend, because you've done, talk about some of the things you actually do for these companies, and we can dig into it a little bit.
Yeah, investing in automation. So automation itself can be kind of a big term. I mean, big term, ambiguous term, a term full of jargon. But really what we do is help people make sense of the tools that they have so that they run in harmony. As the tools start running in harmony, that can be considered automation. The one thing you don't want to have is a set it and forget it mentality for your marketing. You want to have something that, again, from the start of this episode today, the human touch. But you want those tools when someone visits your site to have the information recorded so that you can then bring that over to a retargeting campaign on Google or social, or you can actually log the fact that the person or their buying habits, for example. So if they've gone and they've purchased a certain amount of wine of a certain time of the year, a perfect automation sequence is to flag that to the call center or the sales staff so that they can then talk to that person and not send them an automated email, but actually an authentic phone call like, hey, saw you bought 2 cases of wine last month. How is it? Did you serve anything good with it? Need some more? Something like that. And that same thing goes over, especially on the business to business side, where you're targeting a large winery, say one of the top 50 wine brands, where they may have within their sales and buying cycle, there may be 20 people that have kind of a say in what new capital expenditures taking place. Say you're selling them a $500,000 piece of equipment. It may take 3 to 5 years for that winery or that to be able to buy that piece of equipment. So it's a very long nurturing sales cycle. And you need to have systems in place that make sure that those your company stays top of mind with them as that winery is making their decisions.
Drew, I want to, you always are, provide a plethora of resources. And I'd love for you to talk a little bit about different organizations and associations in the wine industry that would be important for people to check out. Because I know on this particular episode that you talked about Grassroots Coalition, Free the Grapes. So that and any other, associations or organizations people should check out.
Yeah, definitely. Free the Grapes was just a few weeks ago, and it's so important to ensure that everyone across the United States has the same access to wines, and they aren't controlled by the larger, state players that just want to keep it for themselves. So that's one of the top ones that I support. The other one is really going into the local AVAs, the viticultural areas, and looking at their websites and looking at their social initiatives.
Love it. Drew, I want to be the first one to thank you. Everyone should check out barrelsahead.com and check out barrelsahead.com. And there's a podcast page where you can check out all past episodes and future episodes. Are there any other places online, Drew, we should point people towards?
You can follow us on Instagram. You can Barrels Ahead. I've got my website, drewhendricks.com. And that's Drew Thomas Hendricks, not the Drew Hendricks, the sommelier, completely different guy. And that's about it.
So check that out. Go to barrelsahead.com and learn more. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.